look back in hindsight, everything is 2020. In hindsight, we make mistakes, we're learning from it. In hindsight, yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, is so much clearer now.
Hey, welcome to Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones, and today I have with me Lori McDowell. Lori is the CEO of L. McDowell, Inc., and a strategic partner with Schooley Mitchell. With over 30 years of experience in the refining, chemicals, and oil and gas industry, Lori has made significant strides in business development, technical sales, and research and development. She holds a BS in chemical engineering from the University of Pennsylvania, an MS in environmental engineering from Caltech, and a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Delaware. Lori is deeply involved in supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. I love that. And is passionate about helping businesses reduce expenses to optimize operations. Her journey from corporate roles to entrepreneurship reflects her commitment to reinvention and empowering individuals to live more fulfilled lives. I'm excited to delve into Lori's experiences and insights today. Wow. Welcome, Lori. How you doing? That's an intro.
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, that's a little, I need to cut that down a little. It's a little long.
and I wrote it. So it's based off of your experiences, right? So you got quite a resume. And when I looked at it, just before we started the show, I'm like, what do I call you? Right? So just wanting to be respectful of all the achievements that and accomplishments that you've had over your life. And wow. That's really impressive. And then chemical engineering?
Chemical engineering is what I worked for in, 30 years. And when I decided to become a chemical engineer, to be perfectly honest, I had no idea what a chemical engineer was or what they did. But I liked chemistry in high school and I was good at math, and chemical engineers had good salaries. And I said, well, sounds good.
Sense.
Let's major in chemical engineering.
Where are you calling in from today?
I'm outside of Houston, just north of Houston.
Okay, good. How's the weather? I like to ask that because
it's pretty nice today. It's it's a little cloudy, but it's in the 70s. So that's 70s in February.
Wow.
It's pretty nice. Where are you?
I'm in Southern California.
Okay. So
it's I went to I've been to Texas a few times, but I remember going. It wasn't Houston. I think it was maybe Dallas or Fort. It was somewhere, and it was like 107 degrees like every day I was there. And so
it could happen.
But then I moved here, which is in Southern California. So I'm away probably about 70-minute drive from San Diego, and it's in the desert. In the summertime, it's like 107 degrees for like a week. So,
right? Yeah.
At a time. So neither here nor there. But I really wanted to talk to you, and this is Hindsight the Podcast, and on the show, I like to bring in different guests, different jobs, different experiences, right? And just talk about decisions, choices, and how they affect your overall life trajectory, right? And then understanding from hindsight some of the decisions and choices that you've had and that you've made, and looking at where you are now, kind of finding the courage, right, to make good decisions going forward and go on a path that you're trying to get to. Right. And just looking at the stuff that you've done, you in high school, you liked chemistry and math. So you went for it. Right. And you achieved all of those things. But then you made a shift. So we're going to get into all of those things. Tell me a little bit about you as a child. Where did the love for math and the love for chemistry and stuff like that come from? Was it always there?
I think it was always there. I grew up as a child. I was the first in my family to even consider college. So my dad was a truck driver. My mom, worked at a nursery school when we were young kids. And I have a younger sister. And I don't know where it came, the math and the science came from, but it was just when I started, I love to read. So I started reading when I was 3 or 4 years old, and I just loved books. So I always loved to read. And when I started school, I was always, ahead of reading. But then when I started taking math, the math just came natural. I do remember having a 6th grade math teacher who she kind of inspired me. It's funny. I have this memory from 6th grade where she was doing the multiplication tables with flashcards. And I knew my multiplication tables, but at one point she was holding the flashcards and I could see the answers. So I wasn't thinking, I was just reading the answers very quickly. And I guess she realized that. And she asked me one that wasn't on the flashcard. And to this day, I still remember it was 9 times 12. And it's like 108. I know that's like in my head now. But it's funny because when she caught me like cheating like this, even though it was something I knew, it kind of inspired me. And I mean, since I remember it, 40 years later, it's hard. It had an effect. And she was a teacher that really probably helped me grow the math and science.
Nice. I did like science. I will say that, but math did not come easy to me. So, I knew I wasn't going to be an engineer. I knew I wasn't going to, do these things. Even though at times I did aspire to be. When I left high school, I did a trade school, and then I went and I worked as a electrical, schematical, and structural drafter. And so I was surrounded as a young kid. I was about 19, and I was surrounded with, all of these professionals, at the time who were engineers, and basically they had a vision, and I had to draw it up for them, right? And it was pretty good. I was too young at that time, too immature at that time to really grasp onto it. But early on, I knew that I wasn't going to make it as an engineer. So that's the point of that story. So tell me a little bit about your time as what was it? A chemical engineer?
A chemical engineer, yes. Well, I had a couple of different jobs. I worked first for an environmental consulting firm. And I remember taking that job, even back then, I remember I had that job. And then I had another job working in a plant. And the plant job paid more. And the plant job was more traditional. And I decided to take the environmental consulting job because one, I thought doing stuff for the environment was a good thing. And two, it seemed like the harder path. So even back then I said, I'm going to learn more if I take the harder path. The other path will be easier, but let me try that one. And so I worked there for 2 years and decided that was when I had my bachelor's degree and decided I need to go back to grad school because all the best projects are going to people with masters and PhDs, and I want to work on the best projects. So I went to grad school, and then I started working in research and development, and I loved working in research and development, but what I really loved was working with people. So more than the actual research, I loved supervising the technicians in my group. So I ended up moving into a sales and technical support role because then I got to work with the customer. And those type of roles are what I did for most of my career. I had a couple of transitions, some by choice, some not by choice, but that pretty much took me to, where I was with my last role when I left it. And that's a story on itself, which hopefully we'll get to in a little bit.
Yeah. So I got two of them then, because one, you said some were voluntarily leaving and some were involuntary, and then you got this last one, right?
Right.
So which one was the bigger challenge for you? And let's focus in on there, because, a lot of times we go through these obstacles and it becomes overwhelming, and it probably was a little overwhelming to you at the time, and we're stuck, right? And some people can go left, some people can go right. So I like to have, guests that come on here who went right, and landed on their feet. And I just wanted to understand and just know a little bit about that experience. So you can pick either one and just let us know which one it was.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about the recent one. But basically, I was fired twice from companies. Okay. And in both times, I worked for companies where, prior to being fired, I was a high performer. I thought I was doing very well. I was somewhat surprised. It wasn't like I knew it happened. But this most recent one happened about a year ago. And, about 2 years ago, I was working in this company. I loved it. And my boss retired, and and I wasn't interviewed for the job, even though everybody kept saying, why didn't you get the job? And I was just kind of like, well, I don't really know. But they gave it to a man who was a white man, about 15 years younger than me, had experience in management, but had less experience in the area we were in. Right. So at that point, I said, I'm going to look and think about my future and what I want to do long term. And that's when I started Schoolie Mitchell. I purchased that cost reduction franchise to do part-time. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this on the side so that when I retire, when my son's out of college, I'll retire and I can I'll have something, in place to get started on. So that was my plan, to work there, a couple more years, 3 or 4 more years, and then retire. And then the atmosphere just changed in the job. And I enjoyed the work, but I didn't enjoy the culture anymore. I felt like I was, being micromanaged. I really felt like they weren't, it wasn't the company it used to be. It wasn't the warm, we didn't feel like we were a group anymore. I didn't feel like we were working on the projects that were really fulfilling. But I was like, okay, a couple more years, I can hang in there. And then one day we had a sales meeting about 4 hours away from where I live. So I had a call. I had just won a really big project in the company. So I had a call with that customer, my boss, in the morning. And I drove in the afternoon 4 hours to the sales meeting. And it was a 2-day meeting. And I went to check into my hotel, and I was excited about the sales meeting because I loved seeing people. I wanted to share best practices. And when I went to check into my hotel, the person said, "Oh, I'm sorry, your room was canceled." And I was like, "What? It must be a mistake. Can you reinstate it?" So I reinstated my hotel room. And then I had a meeting scheduled with my boss for 4:30 that afternoon. So I went in the meeting. I had my laptop with me. And when I walked in the room, I thought it was just going to be my boss and I, but there was another vice president sitting there. And my boss's phone was sitting on the table. And he says to me, HR is on the phone. And HR basically told me, we're letting you go. We're firing you. You'll be paid till the end of the day. We think your new business is a code of conduct violation. And I was like, well, I asked you if I could do this. And you said yes. And they came up with all this stuff that was not real. Like, yes, on paper, you could say it is. But if you looked into it at any way, you would say, no, this isn't really a code. But they fired me. And I had to, it was 5:00 in the afternoon at this time. I was 4 hours away from my house. They canceled my hotel room and I pretty much had to drive home. And I was embarrassed because, my coworkers had saw me at the hotel and knew I was going to be at the meeting. So clearly I was going to be the talk. What happened to Lori? Where'd she go? And I was kind of the face of the company at conferences. I had the biggest customers. So I think I was an example, like, look, nobody's safe. You have to buy into what we're saying or we're just going to let you go.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting drive home. But on that drive home, I really had some, I started thinking a lot. The first half of the drive was really just anger and why did they do this? And amazement, like, why did you make me drive? You couldn't have just fired me this morning. And yeah, so that was like, so that was the first part of the drive.
Yeah.
But the second part of the drive, I realized, like, somewhere in there, it occurred to me that I don't have to go to work tomorrow. And when I thought that, all of a sudden I felt like happy and I felt lighter and I just felt so amazing. Like, I don't have to go to work tomorrow. And at that point, I just felt like I felt freer. And I decided that, I wasn't just going to jump into another job. I was going to look at my life and see, it was like an opportunity. Like, what do I really want to do right now?
Wow. That is horrible. That is a horrible story.
It's a horrible story, but I use it when I give my keynote talks now. And I have this, like, people in the audience are like, you made me drive 4 hours. So it's kind of like, so it's almost, it's so horrible. It's almost funny.
So this happens. What were some key things? You said that you started feeling freer. What were some key things? Because you still had 2 hours to drive.
Right. The first thing was funny because at the time I was taking part in a coaching kind of mindfulness coaching project. And there was a group call like that evening at about 7:00 at night. And I was kind of disappointed that I wasn't going to make the call because I was going to be at the meeting. We had a dinner and event. And I was like, I can make that call now, which the call was amazing because it was, a Zoom call with a bunch of people I had never met. But when I told them my story right then and there, and I got so much support and love and positive, it just helped me feel good. So that was one. And like I said, it just felt like a weight that was on my shoulder was gone. And I liken it to, when I thought about it, I felt like I knew I wasn't really happy in the job, and I felt like it was standing at the edge of the cliff and you're like looking down and you see the beautiful water and you want to jump, but you're just scared.
Yeah.
And, so it was almost like, the HR came up to me and pushed me off the cliff. And now I was
swimming free.
I'm swimming free and I'm happy. And it just said, it was almost like a reset, like, wow, I can do what I want to do. I'm empowered to figure out. I mean, I need money and I'll figure something out, but other than that, it was like, I had a couple job interviews and none of them felt right. Or, I even had a couple offers and I was like, no, I don't think I want to work in chemical engineering anymore necessarily. I don't think I want to work for a corporation.
Yeah.
That's when I decided to write the book because I said, I always thought I would write a book. I didn't know what I was going to write about, but I said, I want to write a book. But I never had the time. And it was suddenly like, well, I have time now. There's nothing I have to do. So I can, if I want to take the time and write a book, why not now?
Two things. One, that was a great analogy. Standing on the edge of the cliff, looking at the water, but scared to jump. That's amazing. I love it. Two, have you finished your book that you started writing?
I finished writing the book. I'm in the revision process, so I'm working with an editor on just revising it. But the book is written. It will be out hopefully in May. I have a publisher. I have the editors. So I'm doing the final touches, working on the cover art, working on the dedication. So just
do you have a title?
And yes, the title is called The Reinvention Mindset.
So give me one key factor in the reinvention mindset. Something to look forward to in the book.
One of the key things is fear, and really just how
talked about that.
Fear. Yeah, we talked about it, and I in my book I share a lot of my stories, including both the times I've got fired as well as stories from my life. But I also interviewed a number of people who had horrible things happen to them, and yet rather than crumble or get stuck, they did something amazing. People who lost a child and started a nonprofit to support childhood cancer research, or people who had a devastating disease and now they help others. And the key thing was that for them, fear, what a lot of my interviews, as well as what I studied, I found that fear is really just an illusion. Fear is just a thought. And if you find those fears and you face those fears, you can't, it's not enough to just identify the fear. You actually have to look at the fear, figure out what's causing it, figure out what you can do to get over it. But that it's just a thought. And the opposite of that thought is success or happiness or joy. So, once you kind of delve into it, it's really easy to not let it stop you because you realize it's nothing. It's just, it's an illusion. It's something you've created in your mind. I mean, it may be short term, if you're faced with if you're sitting in the jungle and a lion comes at you, fear is a little more than a thought. But once you see the fear and you take the action, the fear goes away because then you're focused on the action. And it's the same way, just like if you touch a hot item and you touch the stove, the instant pain spurs you to action, but you move your hand. Whereas when we get stuck in fear, it's like touching a hot stove and just keeping your hand there and suffering through it. So by facing the fear, you get spurred to action. And it's the action that really is where you find the success. Fear.
That's fun. I remember, and I'll be quick. I remember I went to Birmingham and they had a zip line there. And it's you have to climb up this tree on the inside of this tree. And it was huge. So I was going up, and it was these two little girls behind me, and I was terrified going up because the further you go up, it starts swaying, and my mind, starts telling me things, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so scared. And I tell you what, if those two little girls weren't behind me laughing at me and making fun of me the whole way up this tree, I would have turned around. If it was just adults, I would have turned around and left. But, just trying to be an adult with two kids there and not scarring their future. Anyway, so I went up the tree and I got up to the top and I looked out and I was like, good Lord, this is kind of amazing, right? And when the guy said jump, I just jumped. But the whole way up the tree, sort of like when you jump out of an airplane, the whole way right up, you're thinking, what could go wrong? This is horrible. I may fall. I may blah, blah, blah. But when you're actually there, you want to you want to hope that your mind is in a position to just jump into the water, right? And swim, just jump off and get an amazing zip line ride through the jungles out there. So fear is a real fake thing. You hear me?
It is a real fake thing, but
okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah,
it
is a real fake thing. I thought
you said you lost me.
But I bet once you jumped, I did for a second, but you came back. But I bet once you said you jumped, you probably are so glad you jumped because the ride down was probably amazing.
It was amazing, and I really wanted to go back up again, but that would have been another $60. So, so I just had to live with that one experience. But yeah, fear is crippling, right? And a lot of it, the lion is real. That's real fear, right? That's survival mechanism kick in. But a lot of things we do are trivial. Just trivial things, just fear for whatever reason, whatever socialization or experiences that you've had in the past, and you kind of associate it with these things, right? And you have a fear. It's not just a saying when you say face your fears, because they really are just fake. It's stuff that you're making up in your head 9 times out of 10. Some things are real, okay?
Yeah.
So don't go jumping off a cliff without the water.
Yeah, no, but even in the case of the lion, if the fear paralyzes you,
you're dead.
Then the lion's going to come and eat you. So you might as well. But it's really fear, and it's interesting because after I wrote the book, I started speaking and I started studying coaching and learning, and it's interesting because there's 2 sides of fear. And even from a scientific, using the chemicals that fear releases are, the adrenaline and the fight or flight response. And those chemicals put your body in a place where they're stressful and they're really not good for you long term. I mean, they're okay for that second so that you run away from the lion, but if they stay there, that they cause all kinds of physical issues to your body. Whereas when you face that fear and you get to that place where you're living in joy and success and belief and happiness, the chemical that your body produces are the serotonin and the dopamine, and those are the chemicals that actually put your body in a healthy place. So not only is fear, emotionally could be devastating if you get stuck in it, but physically it's not good for your body either.
I knew I was going to get some insights from the chemical engineer who's going to break it down for me. I really appreciate that. So let's jump. So since we didn't get the book out yet, but it's coming in May, so be on the lookout for that one. You said when you got out, you didn't want to work in chemical engineering anymore. You didn't really want to work for any corporations or anything like that. What motivated you to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I guess it was just the fact that I liked the thought of freedom. Not the freedom in the fact that I can, I guess it is freedom. I could, I could not work every day. I can get up and decide to spend the day, going to the beach and sitting at the beach. Now I won't be successful that way necessarily, but I do have that freedom. But it was just the freedom and the empowerment of spending my time on doing what I wanted to do and trying to find something that can really make a difference, that can help people. Like with Schoolie Mitchell, it helps businesses become more successful. It helps them, it's something that helps them increase their ROI without increasing sales. It helps them save, reduce their expenses. So it's a way to help, small and medium-sized businesses through some knowledge that I've learned with the franchise and that the franchise provide that they didn't have. And then as I, writing the book, I really thought, okay, if everyone who reads this book gets some lesson out of it, then I feels like that's a legacy. That's something I did that helped, people. So the more people who read it, if they all get one thing out of it, that's changing a lot of lives. And that's where I decided to okay, I am a chemical engineer. So I looked at the research and I found out that, some people do make a lot of money from books. It's hard to sell a lot of books, just, to live off just a book. So I said, okay, I love to speak in front of people and I can share the lessons in the book by doing talks, by coaching, by being on podcasts, by doing keynotes. So I started a new company, which I called Reimagine You Strategies. That's really just trying to help people share what I learned. And like I said, I studied, I'm in the process of getting some coaching certifications so I can actually use coaching science, not just my own insight, but to help people and to help people who are similar to where I was. So where they're stuck, they're in a job that they feel like they want to make a change. They know they might make a change, and it could be a job. It could just be life, but they don't know how to get started, or they're afraid to get started, or, they just don't know what to do. And I want to help them, I want to push them off the cliff, or maybe help them jump off the cliff. And pushing's not necessarily the best way, but I'll jump off the cliff with them.
Tell them and let them know it's going to be okay. I like it. It. So you mentioned about ROI, increasing or I guess getting better ROI in not investing a lot more capital. Talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, like in our house, our life, when we need help, we go to a doctor, and a lot of us get annual checkups and we look what's wrong about. But in businesses, a lot of times people don't. They run their business, and, they have someone who's a supplier who they may have had for 10 years, but they never go back and look at that. And they never really look at some of the simple things that may help their business. And what we do through Schooling Mitchell is we have a team of experts in different areas, things like telecommunications, things like shipping, things like credit card processing, waste. And these experts can help the businesses negotiate with their existing vendors and get them better deals. And because we've worked with 28,000, we've got a lot of franchises in the US and Canada, we've worked with 28,000 different companies. Okay. So we have kind of the buying power of a bigger company. So we can actually get deals that even if you had the time and the expertise and the knowledge to do it yourself, you might not get that deal because you're John who has 3 locations. Right. Whereas we are working with a vendor, and we're Schooling Mitchell, who's worked with 28,000 companies. So they will give us a deal that person could not necessarily get. And we do it on a contingency basis. So we don't charge anything for our services. We just share in the savings. Okay. So if we don't find the savings, they don't owe us anything. They got a free expense audit, and they're where they were before with a little more knowledge. If we find the savings, we share in the savings. So either way, their ROI is going up because they're getting savings they weren't getting before. Right. For a couple of years, we share in it. And then after that, it's all theirs. But during that period, we're looking for errors. We're making sure that their contracts and their invoices match. So we're kind of like an outsourced expert procurement department in some ways.
Nice. And I know, well, I'm not going to assume anything. ROI means return on investment. So I just want to put that out there. Return on investment, yeah. Right. Good.
Yeah. So, and the best way to increase, you can increase it by increasing your sales, but that's not always easy. And that's where the business person's expertise is. Right. Their expertise is not necessarily in expenses. So that's why we help them by, while they're busy increasing their sales, we're helping them reduce their expenses so the return on investment can increase.
Got it. What challenges did you face when you actually went on your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, the biggest challenge is financially, because you go from having benefits and having a constant salary to suddenly you're on your own and you have to figure it out. So that was probably the biggest challenge. But, I kept reading my book and thinking about what I learned. And we talked a little bit about fear, but one of the other thing was belief and just believing that. So I had to keep believing that I'm going to make this work. Trust myself, trust that it's going to work, keep working towards it. You can't do nothing and expect it to work, but, believing in myself. So
beautiful.
That was one of the biggest challenges. And the other biggest challenge was just not knowing, it was completely new to me. I had never done this before. I didn't really know what to expect. And that's where, the community is amazing. I mean, just, putting questions online or joining networking groups of small business owners. Oh, yeah. All of that has been so helpful because there's so many people, so many entrepreneurs out there that are willing to help you for nothing other than to help you.
That's awesome. So now I want to shift a little bit, talk about something that's a little near and dear to my heart, and that's DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. What strategies have you found effective in promoting diversity and inclusion within the organizations you work with?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's something, as a woman in a chemical engineering, I mean, usually there was, me and a couple others in a room full of men. So definitely it was different.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found was, trying to face it head on and, coming at them right didn't really help that much. It just, it got more resistance.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was almost like you had to kind of come around to the back door or, kind of come into it from a sideways and just bringing in, sharing research on how companies are more productive when they're more diverse and how they actually make more money when they're more diverse. Bringing in every time, I had a chance to bring in an expert or a speaker, I tried to find someone who was, not a white male, so some kind of diversity.
Right.
And really that was one of the things. And then just, a lot of joining, I also found that joining different affinity groups, not just women's groups, but I'm through American Institute of Chemical Engineers, which is the International Chemical Engineering Association, is they're very progressive when it comes to diversity and inclusivity. They really have they've taken it as one of their goals, and
right.
I was on their board of directors for a little while, and through that, I've joined groups. I mean, I'm on the disabilities outreach group, just to learn more about people with disabilities, because some of the stuff that, someone faces, it never occurred to me, like, that it in a lab setting, that color blindness could be a handicap. I mean, I never even thought about things like that.
Right.
And I've also joined, I'm part of the LGBTQ plus and allies group, because that's another issue. So education has been really key too. Just learning, education and empathy and learning things from other people's point of view, because I think we're all humans, we're all connected, we all live in the same world, and so many people assume things, and by assuming, most of the time you're completely wrong. So just learning as much as I can, asking questions is really helpful, and I think in a workplace, asking the hard questions. I mean, if someone's if you're considering people for a job and they're all the candidates are men or all the candidates are white, you have to ask the question, well, why were there, who else did we interview?
Right.
And things like that. So,
those are great examples. And, I'm involved in our employee resource groups. I'm actually the president of the veterans in military employee resource group. But like you, I support the other ones as well. So I'm a part of basically all of the ERG groups in our company, right? In being a part and immersing yourself in these different spaces, right, it does allow you an opportunity, and you got to come in with an open mind. It does allow you an opportunity to grow yourself and learn, right, and to be, better able, like you spoke to, you like talking to people. So it just allows you to better understand things. Because, man, I learned so many things, Lori, just in those spaces, things that I just say, or have said, just in common speak, it could offend somebody, right? And understanding that makes for a better culture where you work at, right? So I think education, to your point, and just having an open mind and immersing yourself. And you may not agree with everything, right? And you may have some pushback, right? But at least now you're educated on those things. Now you can have a good conversation about them and move forward. So
there's definitely learning. The more you could learn. I know one time I was part of working with this the LGBTQ plus group, and I said I would make a poster for them, and I went to the store to pick up the poster that was printed, and it was funny because I went to the store and I could see, it was almost like I could see the person looking at the poster. And when he saw the topic, it's like his whole demeanor changed towards me. And he kind of was looking like, and it was like for the first time, like, and I was like, I realized like, wow, that felt really bad. Like this guy was real friendly, and suddenly he looked at the content on the poster and he wasn't anymore. And it made me realize that some people go through that every single day. And it was really, a learning experience to feel that, how, some people feel that from people every single day. And I think the more we learn about what other people go through, the more we can be an advocate for everyone. And like I said, everybody deserves, one of the things I talk about in my book and my coaching is that everybody is amazing. Everybody deserves to live a life full of fulfillment and joy.
Right.
And everybody has contributions. Everybody's worthwhile. So
I'll tell you what, I did a few years in the Army, and it's a very, diverse bunch of people in the military. And when you start to talk, that's why it's easier for me, like, to just be in those different spaces. When you start to talk, you hear all kinds of stuff that you weren't privy to, in your own limited reality, right? And once you open that reality up and realize that you're not the center of, of the universe and there are other things that are happening, it just makes you a better person. And I'll tell you what, it really can enhance and make for a beautiful climate, be it in your home, be it in the workplace, in your environment, your community, whatever it is, right? Just having an understanding of the individuals that you are around and you live around. So what's the one that you do now? You Reimagine.
It's called Reimagine Use Strategies. Yes.
So could you share a story of a reinvention or overcoming adversity that has shaped your perspective on life and career from your own personal? I know you got a few of them in the book.
I got a few of them, but I'll go back to one that happened when I was, I guess I was a senior in high school, and my little sister was in 8th grade. So she was about 13 or 14 years old. And we were looking at colleges and visiting, trying to decide what to do. And my little sister got hit by a car when she was in 8th grade. And she was actually in a coma for 6 months. And she to this day, she suffered traumatic brain injury, and she can't live on her own. She has, both physical, mental issues. So she lives with my mom. Okay. But that experience, I think it changed the rest of my life, because I was at that point where I was getting ready to go to college. And when this happened, clearly my mom and dad were completely focused on my sister, and I wanted to be there, but I had to decide, do I put off college? Do I stay? Can I help them? And it did a couple things for me. One, it made me realize that life's not guaranteed. We never know when something's going to happen, how much time we have left. So it made me it changed my mindset to not wait, if there's something that's meaningful for you, don't put it off, don't wait. So I decided, I couldn't do anything staying home, so I would just go to college. But I had to finish it. Also, the other thing it gave me a sense of it. It really taught me independence. Because suddenly I had to pick my colleges without my, parents going to them. I had to, suddenly I had to do everything myself, and I had to leave home at a difficult time. I didn't go too far away, but, I ended up picking a college that ended up being the least expensive one, because I figured it wasn't my first choice, but I was like, well, if my parents could use the money for my sister, I'll go to the less expensive one. And I hadn't even visited that one yet, but I was like, well, you know what? I'll try it. And it ended up being a really good experience for me, because it's where I actually, it was in Philadelphia. So I was really increased, the type of my exposure to different diverse individuals, because I had pretty much lived in a small town where, everybody was more or less the same. And suddenly I was living in a big city where, I met so many different people, and I developed a sense of, self-sufficiency. I was able to get started on my own. My parents were there as much as they could, but clearly they were preoccupied. And, to this day, if I could go back and tell my sister not to cross the street, clearly I would stop it. But the sense of knowing that life is short and that we can't miss out on opportunities, that everything is, a chance to learn something new, to do something new, to try something new. Yeah. And that, lives today. There's one of my favorite quotes is actually by Gandhi. And I may be paraphrasing it, but it's something like, live like you're going to die tomorrow, learn like you're going to live forever. And I just feel like, that's how I want to live my life. I want to get the most out of it today, but yet I still want to keep learning, because if I'm going to be 100, I always want to learn something new.
Wow. Thank you. One, for sharing that story, and then two, for also offering that quote from Gandhi. That is powerful. I just had a conversation with someone, and I was talking about how I love learning different things, almost to a fault, because sometimes it's too, it's too diverse. It's too many different directions, right? But I do love to learn, and I do get a lot of that spirit and a lot of that desire to learn from my mom. She's still, doing the same thing, going to schools and, just continuing to learn. So I do think that is a great advice for people, because a lot of times we get stuck with the knowledge, and that is our reality. You know enough to survive in your space and your, wherever it is, right? And everything else is not true, right? And you're losing in that. You're losing an opportunity to really appreciate life to the fullest, in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I really like that quote, because yes, keep learning. But the other part of it is, don't not do anything until you're perfect at it. Because a lot of times people get stuck, you can get stuck in the not learning, but you can also get stuck in the learning too much, where, people want to start a new business. Well, let me study this. And they study it for 10 years. And it's like, you can keep studying as you're doing it. But if you want to do something, keep studying it, but jump in as well, because otherwise you'll keep learning and you'll get stuck in the learning phase where you're never doing.
All right. So I got my last question for you, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. But as someone who enjoys trying new things and embracing adventures, how do you balance risk taking with strategic decision making in your personal and professional? I mean, we talked about the cliff, right? So how do you do a risk assessment before knowing that that's a good place to jump off?
Yeah, a lot of it, I think, is a lot of times we know it, our intuition, our gut. We know what we're supposed to do, and we kind of ignore it, or we don't listen to it. Mm-hmm. But, I think you need to kind of look at what look at yourself, look at, what do I really want?
Right.
Where, what do I want? Why do I want it? And how can I get there? And if what you're thinking about doing is anywhere on that path, then you need to do it.
Right.
Now, if it's not on that path, then you kind of have to look at, okay, well, why do I want to do it? And is it worth the risk? But if it, and it's not a straight path, but if it's in the general direction to get you where you want to be,
right,
then it's probably worth the risk. And I think, in business, especially, people tend to, especially women, they tend to not take the risks because until they're sure that they're going to succeed. And part of taking risks too is just realizing that there are no failures.
Right.
A failure is just another learning opportunity. So, I've learned so many more from mistakes and things that went wrong than I ever learned from successes. So if you just see everything as, it's something that will be valuable, I can learn from it. And if I fail, I'll recover and I'll learn, and I won't do it again. So,
great lesson.
That's how, and then if the risk is just a risk and there's no benefit to it, clearly it's probably not worth it. but if it's taking you somewhere on where somewhere close to the path you want to go in that general direction, it's probably worth it.
Awesome. So I've asked you a few questions, and now I just want to open an opportunity. Is there something that we didn't talk about that you'd like to talk about or bring up?
Yeah, we talked about a lot. So we really did cover a lot in that short period of time. But I guess just the one thing is, and it is kind of related to risk, but just, I think it's really important to listen to your intuition, to know yourself, and no matter who you are, sometimes people get stuck and they feel I'm unworthy or I don't deserve this, but everyone deserves to have the life they want. Everyone deserves and is worthy, and we're all born with everything we need, everything we want, and knowing how to get it. We're all born at amazing people, and just don't let any experiences you had through your life, tamp down that spirit, because everything that you were born with, you still have inside of you.
Right.
And, for that, we came up with the tagline for my new business, because it's Reimagine You Strategies with the U. And our tagline is, "Are you finished?" And it's a question. And it's just because really, we're never finished. I mean, there's never if you're waiting, if you keep saying, I'll do this when I get there or when I get there, you're never going to get there because there is no there. It's a journey.
Right.
And, you just got to keep going because the journey is there. I mean, it's not a place. It's there's no destination. There's a journey. And if you look at life that way, I mean, you'll just find so much joy in it, so much more fulfillment. It'll just be, one big, great adventure.
I love it. That is, that's a way to wrap up the interview or the episode right now, because a lot of times you see, you imagine, or you have a place where you want to be and you're not there, and you don't take the necessary steps to get there for whatever reason. But just understand it. I love how you said it's the journey. The journey is the destination in a sense. Because once you get to where you think you want to go, you're going to see that, no, you're not. What is your tagline?
Somewhere else.
Yeah. What's your tagline?
Are you finished?
Are you finished?
Are you finished?
You're not finished. So you'll just keep going. But Lori, I really want to thank you for coming on Hindsight the Podcast and for sharing your insights, sharing your wonderful stories. Some weren't so wonderful. Talking about the 4-hour drive
some are not
back.
necessarily wonderful, but you can learn from them, and they all get you someplace.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there were great lessons in those stories. Just a horrible, choice of how, they made you drive 4 hours one way and then 4 hours back, right? I think that was very insensitive, but that was a great lesson, and you took ownership of your life, yourself at that moment. The first 2 hours, you kind of had a little pity party for yourself a little bit, and then the second 2 hours, you got to it and figured out your path, and that's the whole message, right? You have a decision to do this or do that, right? It's all on you. So thank you.
Choice is the key word.
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that story, and continued success with Reimagine You. And I really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Lee. I really enjoyed it.